It's an ancient erosion event. And what the Ozarks really consist of is an ancient dome from when the Ouachita plate pushed up and made it rise up. That's why if you were to go to the town of Boston, which is the top of the dome kind of, you'll find that the Kings River goes north, the White River goes west and comes around. And then you've got War Eagle. And then over this way you'd have the Buffalo and the Little Buffalo. And over here you'd have the Mulberry. You see they all radiate out from one point, because that's the top of the dome. So they should not call this the Ozark Mountains, we should call it, what?
Which town?
Boston, on Highway 16, past Pettigrew. That's kind of like the top of the dome, pushed up. But all the rivers flow every direction. You got the Piney Creeks over here. Do you know what it takes to be a river in Arkansas? It has to be 100 miles long. Anything less than that's a creek. So that's why those are the Piney Creeks. And you got the Illinois Bayou down there too. But everything starts in this one area here. That's where all these watersheds all head out from that one point right there. Kind of like a hub of a wagon wheel. And, so what I'm gonna do,
Pettigrew. Pettigrew's the center of the dome.
Boston.
Boston.
If you look up the definition for Boston, it says a rough and rocky place. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Trigger Gap out here and the history here.
But this used to be seafloor.
Yes,
Used to be seafloor.
it's been pushed up.
Yes, right.
Raised up. That's why if you get around here in a cave or dig around very much, you'll find these kind of things right here. I'll pass these around. These go back before the dinosaurs. This was all found within 2 miles of right here.
Oh, wow.
This is what these are. You can look at them. This was kind of like a squid. This was its body. Yeah, so
Dilophosaurus.
it's got a name about that long. I can't pronounce it.
Dilophosaurus.
Yeah, they're
Yes, I have some.
There's fossils in all the rocks.
yeah, that's all those are the same animal right there. And the crinoids, we find all the rocks with the holes in them. Those are plant stems, ancient plant stems. They're up and down the river everywhere.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, that's Dilophosaurus.
Hey, pass them around. These are pretty cool.
Because these are older than the Rocky Mountains. These are older mountains or hills than the Rocky Mountains, because that's a tectonic.
Not really, not really. The oldest mountains in the United States are Black Hills.
Okay.
Black Hills.
Black Hills are the oldest.
While we're on geology, you know, back when the Save the Ozarks was trying to make sure we didn't get 100,000 kilowatt power system. Pat Custer's big point to the review committee was this is karst soil.
Right.
Explain karst soil. I see it as
It's just,
where the rocks.
it's all broken up. The water circulates through it,
Right,
Just runs right through it real fast.
yeah,
There's all kinds of cave formations under all of us all the time under here.
yeah.
It's limestone. Limestone is animal shells built up thousands and millions of years. Some of these bluff lines are 700-800 feet high, from the bottom to the top. That's all little pieces of animal shells.
And he's afraid to walk on a 2x4 sidewalk. I'm afraid to walk down Main Street.
I've always heard it called the Ozark Plateau.
Well, it's a dome. It's been pushed up. There's basically 3 plateaus. There's Spring Cape Plateau. That's where Berryville is. When you go out east of Eureka, drop down that big valley. So that's the Springfield Plateau. We're in the Boston Range. On the northern end of it. Round Mountain, which is just right over there, is the last island, kind of that Boston Range.
Is the pushing up volcanic?
No, it's from the plates, the
Okay.
Ouachitas.
Okay.
Now, the Ouachitas were volcanic. And what's wild about the Ouachita, that plate, they surface, over the Arkansas River. That's why you have hot springs, diamonds, and quartz. But they resurface again all the way down the Mexican border,
Okay.
down by Big Bend. Pop up down there too.
I've been there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yes, it
It's
is.
all part of that same Ouachita mountain range, the volcanic part of it.
What area is considered the Ozarks? I mean, if you go up to Missouri, how
It's
far east?
Ozarks go all the way over to the St. Francis Mountains. They go up into Missouri,
Okay,
all the way up to probably past Interstate 44 probably.
okay.
And then they go over into Oklahoma too.
And how far east do they go?
all the way to Ball Knob, Arkansas, where that is. Batesville. If you get a topographical map and look at Arkansas, you'll see that all the foothills, they call them foothills, it slopes down. It goes right down to about Ball Knob, then it's flat all the way to Memphis. At one time, except for Crowley's Ridge, which runs over there. Crowley's Ridge is an ancient gravel bar.
Oh, really?
From whenever, you gotta remember how much ice was here during the glaciers. It was over a mile thick up in northern Missouri, is where it got to. And when all that melted, it formed a river, which the Mississippi still straddles that corridor. The river was from Ball Knob to past Memphis. That's how wide the river was 100 miles wide. And it was all this water, and it built gravel bars, and down that, which is what Crowley's Ridge is, which runs from Missouri all the way to Helena, an ancient gravel bar. It's pretty cool. That's a lot of water. Yeah. And then also, as the ice melted, things rose up a little bit more. Because the ice, the weight of it pushed things out. And that was part of what helped bring up this plateau or this dome, this ancient dome.
Is that activity, is TikTok activity still active now?
Yes. Part of it,
Still rising?
the New Madron is running right along the Mississippi River. The biggest earthquake in North America was turn of the century over there. That's the one that created Real Foot Lake, that area there. And so-
Moved the Mississippi over too. didn't it?
Well, the Mississippi just, when that depression formed, it ran in from both the top and from downhill too, and just filled it full of water, and created that giant lake.
Oh, sure.
So they say the river went backwards, but it was just filling that void, is what it was doing. And that's still, they're expecting one any time. It rang bells in Philadelphia when it went off. It was that big of an earthquake. The reason that a lot of people didn't get killed was there weren't very many people there. There's probably 1818 or something like that, 1816 when that happened. So
I was gonna ask, when this got pushed up, and it sounded like part of his question, but was that a slow process, or was there a massive event?
I think it was in 3 different stages from what I've read. They kept pushing it up. And the Ouachitas below us, actually as the plate was pushing, if you look at the geology down there, like if you've ever been in the Cossata River, the strata, here everything runs like a wedding cake layered. You get down there on the Cossata, and it's vertical. That's why the Cossata, the river there, in one section it drops 80 feet a mile. It's the biggest whitewater we have in the state. Cossata is an Indian word, it means skull crusher.
Means what?
Skull crusher.
Skull crush.
Yeah, it's a whitewater stream, But all that down there, as the Ouachitas push that up, they are ripples. They're folded, basically, is what happened. And then that caused this all here to be pushed up. And that's how we got here, to these hills that turned into really valleys. This is an ancient erosion event, is what it is. Still going on, like he was telling us about the streets of Eureka. Every time there's a snow and a freeze and thaw, the rocks come crumbling down. This one geologist friend of mine said you could blindfold him and take him to any place in the Ozarks and let him loose in 30 minutes. He could tell you which side it was cleaning off where he was at. He would know which area of the Ozarks he was in. By just studying the rock and the way it's falling off, the angles from it.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty neat. But we live in a very enchanted area.
Yes, we do.
It's magical.
It is.
Yeah.
You have 4 temperate zones that come together too. So you can have grasses on the north slope of the hill in the Ozarks that grow all the way to the Arctic Circle. On the south side of that same hill, you have cacti that grow all the way to the equator. It's all thrown together. That's why right now, there's 5 days in the spring, 5 days in the fall, where this is the most magic place you can be in the country. And we're into that 5 days right now. That's what happens now, the curtains are up. They'll leave the shades there, now we're mowing grass.
I saw the lightning bug several.
Did
several
you? I've been
evenings ago.
looking.
Yeah.
Oh, I always mark the days for the whippoorwills and the lightning bugs. Yeah. They're going away, slowly, slowly.
I thought I was seeing things. I see the streak of light. What is that?
You know what's happening to the lightning bug? The cutting of hay. Habitat. Whenever they roll up all this hay around us right here, it's eliminating their habitat. That's what's happening. Lightning bugs are deteriorating, they're going away.
Wow. It's
But it's mainly, one day we're gonna have to decide if we want cows or nature. It's coming to that one.
They're doing well at my house.
Are they?
I've got hundreds of them.
You're down by the water?
No, on a shelf. Here's the hollow, here's the ridge, I'm on a shelf. I've got old trees, I've got an open 2 acres
When they
space.
clear these fields and then they go in and mow them to roll up that
And
big
I've got lots of areas I don't touch and
Yeah.
lots of native plants.
place for them to hide.
And I've got
nest.
hundreds of
So it takes, yeah.
I do too.
Yeah. Now, we're gonna talk about the people who came here first. You know, there's a lot of theory on that. They came here for maybe the land bridge, the Bering Sea, 30, 40 million years ago. The first people they know about in the Ozarks probably would have been 15,000 years ago, somewhere around there. And this area right where we are, what first the group came in would have been the hunters. They followed the animal herds. You know, there were mastodons here, there were bison, there were elk, and so they just moved behind them. And then later, the gatherers came with them too, the hunter-gatherers, and started mixing together. And then they started building shelters and starting to stay. And the area up at Rock House, the reason it's called Rock House, is for the Native American bluff shelters that are up and down that valley. And one of them is Brittner Hollow, which is on the way up there, a beautiful area, private property. But was there was a book put out. I bought some really good books that I'm not a geologist, I'm not an archaeologist, but I read a lot. And there's a great little book that was put out about the Native Americans in this area. And you can find these every once in a while, they're pretty rare. It's called The Ozark Bluff Dwellers. This is a great little book and hard to find, very rare. But the coolest part about it is this gentleman, Mr. Harrington, describes coming here from New York and rode the train to Eureka. He describes No, it's Mark. Donald was the professor at the university. But he describes riding the train in Eureka before all the lakes and all that. But he went out with a wagon and he went to all these big giant bluff shelters and did digs, and that's what's in this book. Yeah. Yep. And the description of riding the train is incredible. And then his journeys out to, you went down to like the big cave at Lost Valley, one of them. But the neatest thing in that book is what he describes from Blue Springs all the way to Bentonville was a city, all along the bluffs of the White River. See, most people don't realize that at one time you could put a boat in Fayetteville and go all the way to the Mississippi River in a canoe. It would have been the greatest river ride in all this whole continent. But the lakes, the dams, stopped all that, you know. But yeah, there's what's under those lakes is incredible. All these structures and these bluff shelters that were there, and but that's all been covered up. It's been covered up for a long time. But he describes everything that's under the lake in that book. It's really neat. It's a great book to try to get a hold of.
There's a copy, Deborah found a copy of that book at the Library of Congress, so you can actually go online.
That's right, you
And
did.
download the PDF
Yeah,
of that whole book.
it's a short little read, but it's a great little
I
book.
forgot to mention, there's tablets and pencils over there if you want to take notes on any of this.
Ernie,
Help yourself.
Yes.
about the train, was it a narrow gauge railroad?
It was from Seligman. It was from Seligman coming into
Yeah.
Eureka.
And it was really narrow.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's a great book too. I couldn't find my copy of it. Somebody's borrowed it, but it's called Short Line Railroads of Arkansas. You ever read that book? It's an incredible story of that whole railroad. You know what most people don't realize, you know where the train went from here after they kept building it? It went all the way to Harrison. That's where the great train yard was. The round table and the engine station and all that were in Harrison. And then they went to Leslie. Because in those days there wasn't any cardboard. Everything was shipped in barrels. So you had barrel steaks. It's all about barrel steaks. Leslie was a barrel steak town. And then they went on down to Hoover Springs, Searcy, Kensett, all the way over to Cotton Plant. The train went to Helena. And in Helena, they put the train on a ferry, it ferried it across the Mississippi River, where it went to Pensacola. So this little train that used to run here used to go from Seligman all the way to Pensacola, Florida. What a great train ride that would have been for the Ozarks. Oh man, crossing the Buffalo River. And
The river was up.
one of the problems with the train was all the trestles and bridges that they had to maintain, all that expense that you were talking about, is it got washed out every time we got one of these 6 or 7 or 8 inch trains. They'd have to go repair it. The train never made a profit, ever. The whole time it was in business.
How long was it in business?
All the way up to the 50s. you know, they kept it going for quite a while. Until I started on the lakes. That's what stopped the train. It would have been a great train this time of year. Another great book, this is a guy named Schoolcraft. He's kind of the Lewis and Clark of the Ozarks. This guy came here in 1818, 1819, and kept a journal of his visit to the Ozarks, and really great description, and the people that he met too. This is a really good read right
What's the
here.
name of the book?
It's called Rude Pursuits and Rugged Peaks. Schoolcraft ended up being a very, very famous writer. This is his very first book. He was working for a mining company out of St. Louis, looking for lead and zinc at this time. And the coolest thing about this book, to read it, is that his description of what the Ozarks looked like in 1818. Nothing like what we drive through today. In those days, an acre of land would contain maybe 12 trees. The Ozarks weren't a dense, heavy forested area like they are today. It was these giant trees, monstrous trees in a glade. Wildflowers, there weren't any briars or thorns, sticker bushes, poison ivy, all that was absent. You could take a wagon and a horse and pretty well go anywhere you wanted to go, except at a river. When you get to the rivers in his description, they were deep and channeled. There were no gravel bars. When we go down to the river today, we see those gravel bars. At that time period,
100 yards of gravel.
that's all from man cutting all the trees. It's part of the erosion event that's going on in the Ozarks that we've helped, you know, add to. So that's all. It's really neat to think about that, though, that there were no gravel bars. Now you go down the river, it's just gravel bar after gravel bar after gravel bar. And you think all the Native Americans ran up down these gravel bars, but they didn't. He later on wrote all kinds of books about Indian lore. He was the.
He was a linguist.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Became a very with the Native Americans. 5 or 6 different books that he did. He was the for the Great Lakes. He was the agent with the federal government for all the Indians there. And, but it's a quick and easy read. But his description, the delicacy of the time period was bear bacon, and everybody had bear oil lamps. This steak was called the bear steak for a long time because there were so many bears, and they would render the fat down and make oil out of it. Now, can you imagine what that smelled like? You know, I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Yuck.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the town over by Batesville in Newport called Oil Trough? Oil Trough was named for the bear oil. It was in a trough and you just dipped it out. That was a famous place to go get bear oil out here.
Did you find that author?
So Ernie, Osage was that the first native people that settled?
What happened was whenever the Native Americans first came in here, all the land between the Arkansas River and the Missouri River was originally given to the Cherokee. This was an Indian territory way back, the first one, one of the first treaties with the Cherokee. And a day later, we kept, like we did with the Native Americans, like we're still doing today, we just keep kicking them over and kicking them over and kicking them over. So whenever the Trail of Tears and Andrew Jackson came through, he took that all away from them. And then the Osage came in later on, around 1700s. This was their hunting grounds. And so they were in Missouri. They were given part of Missouri, and they would come down here to hunt.
So,
Do you know
free
they-
white man, was it just mainly tribes passing through?
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't no tribes settled here, you don't think?
Do you know that they were moved here from Tennessee though?
Yes, they were.
And not telling them that the Osage Indians were already here.
Well, the Osage were hunting here. The Osage mainly lived in Missouri, but would come down and set up hunting camps. And a lot of the Shawnee are also here too. There's another tribe that was present during that time. They're first you have the bluff dwellers, which is before all the tribes. That would have been 1,300 years ago. The tribes started coming in here later on when they were being relocated, a lot of them. This was a place where a lot of hunter and gatherers would move through and pick stuff up. And I also brought a sample of, these are all points that I found in this area. Since we're talking about Trigger Gap, you can pass these around. These are all points from right here. And some of these could be, it's amazing.
These are bird points.
They're called bird points, but they weren't used to shoot birds with. They were just different arrow point. Yeah, those are called bird points. Those are all down at the farm. When we float down to the farm, what you find is anytime you have a creek or a confluence of a spring-fed stream into the river, you usually got a place where there was a camp at one time. And if you just look around, Ben, who works for me, down at the farm, found 125 points in 1 year. He just had a stick with a nail in it of it, he just flipped rocks every time it rained. And he's got a whole bucket full on his porch.
Tom Brimkus has a great collection.
Oh, I bet he's in a really nice area up there, yeah, Tom's got a great spot there.
Raid one day, I walk out in front of our cabin and walk in. Oh, there's
There they are.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Well, they had a long period of time to make these here. You know,
Yeah.
thousands of years they've been
Yeah.
making them. Some of the arrowheads go back as much as 12, 13,000 years.
How does one, like, if you get an arrowhead, how can you mark some information on it without trashing it to, like,
I have no idea.
document it, like, say, you know. pretty bad.
Sticky
Information.
Sticky notes, okay.
Another great book, if you want to read about the Ozarks, about its geology, about all the Native Americans and the early settlers, is this writer right here, Kenneth Smith, Buffalo River Country. The first part of this book is all about the geology, and then he breaks it down into all the first Native Americans who came here. This was my Bible in the 70s. You know, I've been floating, my first trip on the Buffalo was in 65. I
Wow.
was very lucky to be in the Boy Scouts in Tennessee at the time. I've grown up, I grew up in 14 different states. My father was a career naval aviator, but my grandparents were all from Arkansas. So I spent the month of June on a farm here and was very lucky to start canoeing the Ozarks way back there. And with this guy right here, this was the first maps of the Buffalo that you could get for floating. There weren't any maps available in the early days. You just got on the river and talked to the old timers where to get in and get out. But those maps were so valuable in the early days. And in the back of his book, he's got a set of maps where he divides the river all up. So we're getting into like the early settlers who came in here. Eastern Arkansas was a barrier to the first white men that came in because of all the St. Francis River and all the swampland. The whole east coast of Arkansas is really hard to come through. So when people went around, they either come up through Missouri and came down, or they came down from Louisiana and came up, or they came up the rivers. The rivers were the interstate at the time. And then there's also a great culture that we just find a little bit about every once in a while, and that was the mound builders. There were mounds in Arkansas too, lots of them. Even on the Buffalo River, maybe even over by Huntsville, there's a mound.
Are you talking about the Toltecs?
Yeah, part of that, yeah. Mhm. And the mountain people were really incredible. Over in Spiro, Oklahoma, that's was kind of like the Washington D.C., where Cahokia, east of St. Louis, was like the New York City. When London only had about 300 or 400 people in it, there was probably 30,000, 40,000 people living in the village east of St. Louis.
Wow.
Cahokia is absolutely incredible. I don't know if you've ever been there. Anybody here been there? The Mount Pyramid and all that. There's a huge earth pyramid there. It's almost as big as one of the small pyramids in Egypt.
Is it the one close to the Mississippi?
It's close to Mississippi. It's on that
It's at the
side.
confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi
No, it's
rivers.
further down.
Well, it's very close to
It
the
is,
confluence.
yeah, it is. But that whole culture, what was amazing about them is they find, parrot feathers from South America, chocolate from South America, quartz from the Ozarks, pipestone from Minnesota, and their money at their time was conch shells. So they were taking boats, dug out canoes down the Gulf, down to the Keys, and picking up conchs and bringing them back, and that was their money. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, a lot of travel going. When Columbus got here, it wasn't, there was a lot of people here.
It's 100 million people here
Yeah, it wasn't like it just,
when white people discovered it.
And part of the problem there was these folks that were living here were one with their land. They didn't have to have domesticated animals to survive. Some tribes had a sacred herd. That herd was never hunted, so they kept their gene pools going.
Wow.
So they and they also burned everything, so there weren't great fires that would sweep through. They actually managed and took care of the woods as the woods, lived with it, still on it.
We brought them syphilis.
Yeah, well, we brought them everything. Because what happened in the Middle East, whenever you domesticate animals and you live with them for thousands and thousands of years, you build up immunities by being around them, you know, like with smallpox and measles and things like that. So these people had never done that. They didn't have those immunities. So we just brought all these diseases in.
And on
And
purpose
just like
sometimes.
80 or 90% of the population is decimated.
90%.
90%, yeah, just wipe them out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with blankets sometimes.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. But some of the earlier white man settlers that came in this area came in from Missouri. There's a great, if you go online, I do a lot of research about the history of the area. I just find it interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And you find that there was, they used to run salt. Salt's not around here very much. You know, so you gotta bring it in. And salt was how you preserved all the meat in those days. And there was called the Great Salt Road. It went from Jacksonport, Arkansas to Springfield, Missouri. And it was a wagon train road. Jacksonport and Buffalo City were as high up as you could go on the White River system. This is another great book. Speaking of White River, this is a great book. This is about steamboats and ferries on the White River. You used to buy a ticket in Buffalo City, where the Buffalo River meets the White River. You could go to Cincinnati. You could go to New Orleans. You could travel on steamboat. Victorian houses on the water. Yeah, really cool. Another great book. This guy was out a little while. Put that book together. It's a really good book. Yeah. There's some great photographs in there of the old days on the rivers. You know, has anybody been to Rush? Does anybody know about Rush? The ghost town on the Buffalo River? Yeah. It was a mining town. At one time, there's a story in there of a steamboat that went up the Buffalo River all the way to Rush. And the guy got there, it was high water, and he immediately got the crew to fire up the boiler and turned around and left, because he knew that boat might be there forever. So he left out, but he did make it all the way up there, which is quite a kind of climb. So the first settlers who came in here, they came in from Missouri. If you go to Springfield, Missouri's Historical Museum, there's great stories about the people migrating down into the Ozarks. And that Salt Road thing is also a story of bringing the salt in. Everybody knows all the squirrels on the road lately? They're all out there like eating the pavement, it looks like. And you wonder why they're in the road. The reason they're in the road is for salt. Because it's starting to get warm, and when we had the winter weather this year, they had that salt mixture of chat that they throw out there that catches in the cracks, and then as the moisture heats up, it distills and leaves salt in it. So they're out there licking the salt out of the cracks in the sand. That's why the little squirrels are always running out in the middle of the road. Salt. Salt's real necessary.
Yeah, I keep the salt block out.
Yeah, me too. It disappears really quick too. Then they start eating the ground and make big holes. So the early settlers in this area came in, and one of the things I found was a price of an acre of land was $1.29. $1.29 an acre.
It was expensive at that time.
It was, yeah, it was.
Because the dollar was.
But that was the first, writing of it and listing it, cataloging the property was $1.29 an acre.
What year? You talking ish?
Probably early 1800s, somewhere around, maybe 1840s, 50s, somewhere around there.
Can you review the tribes, the order of the tribes and about when the Osage were here?
The Osage came late. They came very late. They were like the last ones to hold out in Missouri before, they pretty well lost everything. And they got thrown in Oklahoma on the worst piece of land there was. All the oil was underneath it later on. Yeah. So, but they used to come in here. This was their sacred hunting ground. But before them, the Cherokee were first. But first you have the bluff dwellers. That's the first, and that's before the tribes.
Sure.
Those are the ancient ones. Same time, the Anasazi or the Chaco Canyon and out west and all that, we have the bluff dwellers here. Yeah, we have that period here. And so
you had Cherokee first.
and some Shoshone in there too, mixed in.
And so Osage were hunting grounds around what's the period of time?
1700s, early 1700s.
To what?
Till probably the 1820s or 30s. What happened was they gave up this, or it was taken from them. They say they gave it up, but it was taken from them. And they were booted west. So that would have been Andrew Jackson's time.
To northern Oklahoma.
Uh-huh.
He was horrible.
And so this land became available for the settlers to come in and take over.
Right.
That's how that all happened.
Thank you.
The bird points are my favorite,
Yeah.
because they're so small and how you would work that, yeah, how they would do that.
Have you ever figured out how old some of those are?
I've got several books that tell you, but it's really difficult. The more uniquely and detailed they are, the older they are. They got a little sloppier later on, they just speed it up, production. But there's some arrowheads that go way back. The Dalton points, which there were a couple of them found in Arkansas. Probably 15, 20,000 years old. It's amazing, you know, arrowheads. Incredible. And how many there are all around us all the time, everywhere.
That's surprising that it's disintegrating.
Well, if you find them in the river, they've been tumbled, they get polished. They're really, but these are very faceted. The ones that have been tumbled in the water, they become very smooth and they're almost like, you know, not dissolved, but it's actually a pretty hard rock. That flint is. It's real hard stone. That's why they use that stone to make the arrowhead.
What's the name of the stone?
Flint, and chert, both. You ever seen obsidian arrowheads? The volcanic ones, the black glass ones?
Yes.
Those are incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, black glass, volcanic glass, like New Mexico, out there somewhere.
Or Mexico too.
Yeah, the black glass, they made knife blades out of that, yeah. Okay, the one book that probably changed my whole life, when it comes to geology and the history of the planet. This book here is just absolutely amazing. Diversity of Life. F.O. Wilson, what a cool guy.
Diversity of life.
This
What's it?
is the history of the planet, basically.
When did he write it?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see here.
Edward, is it Wilson?
Edward O. Wilson. This is just one of many books he's done. He's an entomologist, and he compares ants to us. This is 92.
And his name?
Edward O. Wilson.
Wilson.
Wilson,
He's an ant taxonomist?
He's an ant, yes, Yeah, that's his specialty. He's the #1 ant man on the planet. And he
compares-
compares us to ants in a lot of ways.
Well, I love it.
Yeah, and then, but there were so many things I didn't really know about the history of the planet. How many ice ages? I always thought there was just one ice age. There's been many, many ice ages. And that's what he breaks it down. And then his explanation of where we're headed, you know, into the future and what we need to do. And this book is incredible. Corridors for wildlife and forward vision and thought. It's really,
He was ahead of his time.
he's done some great books about the old brain, you know, where we inherit things from ancient times. The fear of snakes. In this one book, he talks about all these things that we inherit in the old brain package when you're born. One of them is the fear of snakes, because one time snakes were really bad news. You know, we don't really have it bad in this country, as say India or Nepal or some of those other countries.
They have more neurotoxins.
Yeah, they do, and they're all after the mice and the rats in the buildings. They get up in the attic and all that. And you know, with one bite, you're done.
Yeah.
And
Here,
quick.
Here, we only have maybe 15 to 20 people a year in the United States die from snake bites. It's not that many when you think about it. And half of those people are holding the snake. Holding the snake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't attack them.
Yeah,
They
just
won't
leave them alone.
attack you.
Leave them alone, just leave them alone, you know. Yeah, give them the right of way.
Religious nutcase things.
A lot of it involves alcohol. Alcohol.
Oh,
People
yeah.
get sick. All the people I know on the river from
Yes.
27 years of being an outfitter,
Exactly.
the 2 people that were snake bit were drunk.
Yeah.
They were holding the snake.
Yes.
Don't put your hands in your feet where you can't see, and you'll never have trouble with a snake.
Same thing with poison ivy.
Oh, yeah, the Pentecostal group. Yeah, they do it. But I don't know any of those people.
They're drunk on power.
So, that's all I have.
Wow, thanks.
Thank y'all. This is wonderful what they're doing up here.
Yes.
You know, and I've been to a roundtable meeting up here, and I learned so much. And the slideshow was incredible today.
Yes, it
I love your weekend. Always learning something new.
I might also say that if anyone wants to see the slides, there's a collection at the library. There's a collection John Cross has, and there's one at the museum. When I go through these slides to make a historic performance performance, production, presentation, there are 4,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
What's the eldest?
Oh, here's,
The oldest is probably the one of the wagon train at Mason Spring.
And what year was
This
that?
one was found
That's
in a cave
1879.
2 miles from here. I think.
And we really, the
And I thought it was
trick
part
of
of
it was some of the photographs are actually dated, like that one November 23rd. Most of them are not.
How do you preserve them? He's a
Well, they're all,
photographer, so
literally, all the photographs are on the computer now.
my great-grandmother.
So we really don't ever touch them.
Grindstone.
Yeah. And the museum now has, we had a lot of newspapers from, oh gosh, the early 1900s. And literally, if you pick them up, they just disintegrate in your hands. So Jeff Denos, the head of the museum, now has a way to actually photograph those. So once they're all photographed, they'll be on computer and we can put them into what is known as a coffin box. It is a treated paper box that doesn't have any wood on the paper. So then we can literally put them on a shelf and never touch them again.
Wow.
And that's all been done now.
that's amazing.
And it's really a lot of fun to look at these pictures of where the hell did they take that picture? Where is it? And once I've gone through these so many times, I recognize all of these different things. And they used, it was real interesting, the streets were not paved until 29, and they used a certain kind of Cannon tractor from World War I that after the war, it was decommissioned, and they sold it to farmers and cities that were literally putting in streets. And it's the strangest tractor I ever saw in my life, but there's a picture of it on the street in Eureka Springs.
Was it tracked? Was it tracked?
It literally, it was a big, huge, like a half circle, and it has all, it looks like a tank, a
Yeah.
Sherman tank. But that's why it could pull all of these cannons in World War I.
Wow.
Thank you all, it was fun to talk to you.
Wow.
Stay as long as you want. Continue
I've
chatting.
announced-
Oh, I'm sorry. Valerie has something she would
I
like to
have an
say.
announcement, follow up the Goddess Gala Tuesday night at the Basin